What's going on, people? It's your good buddy SPJ here. Welcome back to SPJ Live. No, I'm not playing guitar this time. I don't feel like doing a complicated setup today. It was a long day for me. I spent most of it outside, but I smell fresh and clean right now. And I deserve this beer today. Coffee IPA, an upper and a downer in one thing. It's all kinds of weird. But I hope wherever you guys are that you are doing well, that you're all healthy, that you're safe, and that you are all having a good time, doing whatever it is that you've been doing to keep yourself sane. I'm really excited today because we have a special guest joining us on the show. It is Mr. Cody Fields of Westminster Effects. Cody, it's great to have you on the show, buddy.
What's up, Sean? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I'm stoked that you agreed to do this, and stoked that as I promoted this with all of your friends making some rather funny comments about how you were going to make a fool of yourself during this.
Yeah, I mean, what are friends for, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you can't bust each other up a little bit every now and again, what's the point?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And one of those guys is my that's one of those guys. Kyle Daly was my circuit board layout guy. So I irritate him at least on a weekly basis.
Okay.
So anything he gives me, I absolutely deserve. I will own that all day.
I was just gonna say, so you deserved what you got.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, how you been, man? It's been a little bit since we last saw each other in person.
Yeah. It's things have actually been going pretty well. The Rona slowdown actually didn't hit me really until this month, thankfully. Okay. So March, everybody starts, panicking and all that kind of stuff. Right. And I was sitting here thinking, all right, how am I going to make this work? And then I get a distributor order overseas. And it's just like, oh, okay, I'm not going to complain. All right, now what? I get that shipped out. Now what? And
it's funny that you bring that up because I was in the same spot. March, the lockdown started, and I had lined up like months worth of work. So everybody's all like, I can't work. I'm not doing anything. I got all this free time. And I'm like, no, I'm busy every day.
Yeah, exactly. And, so I got that order out. It's like, okay, now what? And then I got another dealer order. Okay, now what? And it just kind of kept piling up, and everybody knows the music production industry slows down in July, which is why we have Summer NAMM then. And so it was predictably slow. It wasn't any slower than normal, thankfully. Yeah. And then this month has been a little bit slower than normal. But it kind of let me breathe a minute. So I'm not going to complain about any of that.
Don't complain about the chance to just sit back and just enjoy the fruits of the previous work.
Yeah, exactly.
Just want to take a moment to say hey to everybody that has been joining. Looks like we got 7 folks watching right now. If this is your first time joining in for SPJ Live, this I think might be a good one for you to get on the program. We do this every week, 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. Hopefully a way for you all to have some fun during your week. We got Music Therapy Laz in the house, Mr. Riley Io Acura. Great to see Riley here, able to catch a live stream when it happens and not on replay. And Mr. Ben Coombs, moderator to the stars. Yep, those are everybody making themselves known in the chat. But hey, we're a welcoming community. We're excited to have you here. Please feel free to interact, make jokes, ask questions. We're here to have some fun. So let's get down to it. How about it?
Let's.
All right. So the first thing that I want to tell everybody is the funny, strange, and slightly embarrassing story of how we met.
Yes, that was a fun one.
It was a fun one. It was a fun one. So for those of you that don't know, Cody and I first met during the Winter NAMM show weekend at the Pedal Builders Summit that Earthquaker and JHS tend to put on every year. And it's a great party. It's one of my favorite things. It's the only party that I absolutely make a point of trying to be able to go to. Yep. And so we're sitting at the table, and Cody and a bunch of his crew are sitting there at the table with us. And then all of a sudden, the conversation turns towards a certain rapper that I have quite a bit of problems with.
Oh, man. Yeah, so we started talking about one Mr. Kanye West and his recent we'll say proclamation of faith.
Hmm.
Whether that is legit or not is to be
Yeah.
seen, of course.
Yes, of
And
course.
and you were not sold, and I take it you still aren't.
Um, you know, I will say this. We'll say this. As a guy who has, I've worked in a church environment. I've known
Yeah,
many people that are some really great Christian folk. Just a pleasure to be around. And the people, yourself, and we'll get into that. When people really mean it. And a lot of the times it's like the actions and the words tend to go hand in hand with one another.
yeah, yeah.
But despite this declaration of faith, the man is not he's not humbling himself any more than he should have probably done years ago. So needless to say, I'm still not convinced. But for those of you out there watching that are believers and are praying people, let's pray for the man.
Oh
Something's
yeah,
not
absolutely.
something's not right going on in that head of his. And
Right.
he's got kids, and we need to make sure that they're doing as okay. He's got a wife. However,
Mm.
whatever your feelings on her is not any of my concern. Something's
Yeah,
up with the dude.
yeah, and at the same time, like for the sake of argument, assume that it is all legit and he actually did properly convert and all that kind of stuff. I'm really glad that my first 2 years in the faith weren't in public before however many millions of Twitter followers he has. you know,
Yeah.
that those early stages, man, like you're still sorting stuff out and it can be rough.
Yeah.
It's still rough. I'm still an idiot. I don't know if anybody knows that other than my people that were making fun of me on your post, but I'm still a moron.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, let's kind of get out of that story and the embarrassment that I suffered meeting someone that I ended up working with. Let's kind of get into the thick of what led you to Westminster Effects. We'll kind of circle back on some of the faith things, because for those of you that don't know and haven't seen, I do have a demo up of Cody's Chrysostom chorus, and there is definitely a connection between your faith and your company. But let's start first with the company. What was your musical journey? What did you get started on, and what led you to starting something by offering the guitar player out there a product to use?
Yeah. So funny enough, so I started playing guitar really Christmas of 2000 was when I got my first guitar and really started. And I still am a mid 2000s pop punk emo screamo kid at heart.
You and my wife would have a great time talking about music you listen to.
Yeah. So, in the Christian world, it was all about Reliant K, MXPX, and then in the heavier, like the much heavier, like Zayo. But then, that branched into, and I'll just go ahead and own it. 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge by My Chemical Romance is my favorite album of all time. I'll just wear it. I don't even care. So all that kind of stuff.
Go own it, man.
Yeah.
Own it. I got no problems with it.
Good. But so that was kind of my musical background. And hilariously enough, also the church I grew up in did not have instruments. So we can get back to that in a second.
Yeah.
So, but it was all about, pop punk, emo, screamo, getting into some post-hardcore later on, metal, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then, so I made the mistake of graduating college in 2009 with a journalism degree.
Nice. We graduated the same year when there were no jobs to be had.
Exactly. But it was even worse for journalism. That same year, the New York Times parent company laid off 4 figures worth of people. Yeah, it was rough. That year and the year before, like every newspaper and really information site out there kind of figured out, oh, we're not making money anymore. nobody was buying papers. Everybody wanted their news online, so they would just go to CNN.com, FoxNews.com, because if it's national, you might as well just get it right there anyway.
Right.
So there was a mad scramble, and I was working survival jobs. Finally landed at an advertising agency here in Greenville, where I managed our clients' blogs and social media presences and all that kind of stuff. And people there wanted to be Don Draper, and they weren't. They did good work, but they weren't legends like Don Draper. And it went south. It went it went pretty sour where I confronted the owner on investing in a client. Mm-hmm. Which we all knew that client was it was going to flop. Mm-hmm. And it turned sour from there. And in the meantime of trying to build up a freelance blogging and social media management side gig or whatever, I built a General Guitar Gadgets Blues Breaker kit.
Nice.
I was like, that was fun. I can make money off this.
Oh no. You went straight from that was fun, let's make money. Yeah, because that's logical.
Right. Mistakes were made. I'll own it. Okay. But at the same time, it was like, that gave me I've always been a creative guy and an analytical guy, kind of all at the same time. So the building a pedal from the ground up really made sense in terms of I can be super analytical, I can be super creative on the branding side, and it all just kind of went from there. And and eventually my father-in-law very generously invested, and I acquired Nose Pedal, which is a utility brand and originally based in Nashville. Mm-hmm. And so brought that all over here, and now it's what I do for my 9 to 5 out of my house right here. You can see my workbench kind of poking out behind my shoulder, along with some other mess that I have going on because it's almost the end of the week, so everything's just kind of thrown everywhere.
You don't want to see what's outside the realm of this.
I know exactly. I know exactly how that goes. The things you can get away with because of the camera angle are amazing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just gone from there. I've done 2 winter NAMs now at the Delicious Audio Stompbox exhibit. I've done 2 summer NAMs, and last summer NAM was my first with my own booth because it's so much less expensive than Anaheim. And obviously this year it got wiped out, which I wasn't. It was disappointing, but nobody was really disappointed at the same time.
Yeah, that's kind of been the whole recurring theme with summer NAM getting canceled, and then now winter NAM next year isn't going to be happening. Exactly. There's definitely there's definitely a feeling that we're okay with this.
Yeah,
there's a little bit of a contingent that's why are we doing this? But it's just as David Lee Roth once said, you got to roll with the punches and get to what's real.
Right. It's one thing I think there's room for debate and legitimate discussion over how serious the virus going around is, which I will leave nameless so you don't get demonetized.
Thank you.
So there's legitimate discussion that can be had.
I think there is too.
Yeah, and so it's maybe let's take a step back, not freak out. Yeah. And maybe have that discussion, but at the same time, enjoy the fact that we will have an extra week free in January.
And an extra $10,000+.
Exactly, yeah.
And we don't have to spend.
And extra hours in sleep that we don't lose and all that kind of stuff.
And brain cells that don't get killed off by the copious amounts of alcohol that everybody drinks. all day long.
Or particularly the brain cells that just get murdered by the 95 decibel ambient noise that's just perpetual.
Oh,
when you have to wear earplugs just so you don't lose your hearing just because you're in an environment, you're probably having a bad time, honestly.
Yeah, just a little bit. We got some more people watching, which is awesome. I know I recognize a few of these names. Russell Mania is here. How you doing, buddy? Good to see it. We got Indigo Serenade in the house. I don't believe I've seen that name on the show chat before, but if this is your first time, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, I am sorry, I don't remember. Let's see who else is we got going. You got definitely getting some thumbs up from Riley on your taste in music. Enjoys the fact that you're an MCR fan. We got Jay Steen in the house, and looks like somebody who knows you, Sam Jones, is here.
Oh,
Sam,
yeah.
welcome
up,
to the
Sam?
show. Thank you for coming in and checking things out. I do want to highlight this this comment that Riley made talking about the latest Ernie Ball YouTube video that they just put up with Frank Yarrow of MCR. Interesting factoid for all of you. I believe in that video, because I saw a teaser of it on Instagram today, you will be seeing Frank playing a guitar built by Justin Abernethy, who we visited at his shop before the virus caused everything in the world to be on lockdown. So if you haven't checked out that little interview with Justin Abernethy and us checking out some of his guitars, go check that out after this show is over. And yeah, that's one of his guitars in that video, which is pretty darn cool. He makes some really awesome stuff, and it's got a heck of a story, man. Like,
awesome. I'll have to check that
out. Great stuff. Great stuff. All right. It looks like we got all our suspects in here. Awesome. So good to have you all. This is great. We should definitely be getting some thumbs ups, and please, if you haven't done so already, please do join in the conversation. If you haven't, please do click the subscribe button. And we're about to get into some weeds now.
Yes.
I do also want to acknowledge my my wrestling podcast co-host AJ from Garguts Entertainment. How you doing, buddy? I got one for you right here. All right. So one of the interesting things that I find about Cody, that I find about his brand as Westminster, is there is a tie to a lot of church. And when I say church, that's just a short way of saying Christianity. There's a tie to his faith. There's a tie to the history of the church. And as someone who in his younger years was definitely a big history buff and just loved learning history in all its different forms, but as someone now older, kind of trying to figure out where he stands with his faith and where things are leading him in his life, I think it's kind of cool to sit with someone who has been in it for much longer than I have, and whose brand clearly has a tie to something that means a lot to him. And this is really where I feel like some of you watching, just some, not all, but I would encourage you, if you're watching right now, if this kind of conversation makes you uncomfortable, just keep an open mind about this, because I find that a lot of the best discussions and chats that I've had recently have been with people in the church environment that I've started going into, and the community that I've chosen to start to learn a little bit more about this spiritual side of myself. So I guess the best way I can kind of give you the floor is just ask you, I guess I can ask you a two-part question. The first being, what was the initial idea why you decided to tie your faith to your brand? But then also, how is your faith important to how you run not just Westminster, but how you run Nose Pedal as well? Because both definitely have this sort of, like, you could argue there's the church world and there's the secular world. Sure. One brand for each, and I don't really like the term secular.
Right. I get you.
Yeah, I get you. So yeah, the floor is yours. This is really the part that I wanna hear definitely from you, as much as you want to say.
Yeah. So I grew up in church. As most people my age are wont to do, right? Like we've typically grown up in church, but it was a pretty legalistic church. I won't drop a denomination on anybody, but it was a very legalistic church. Just so we don't get into name calling and all that kind of stuff. But I also went to a Christian school where I was exposed to other Christian perspectives. all within the realm of Christian orthodoxy and that kind of stuff. And then I went to a Southern Baptist university for college. So I was around these different Christian perspectives that weren't intensely legalistic. And then it finally clicked, like, no, you don't earn your salvation. You know, it's by grace through faith in Christ alone, period. Right. It's you don't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And it's not a the gospel isn't a become a better you program. It's not a get rich quick scheme either.
Right.
So when all of that clicked, it was, holy crap, what have I been missing? And let's dig, let's get every resource I can find, and if I'm gonna do this, let's do it right. And so it's when we learn about American history, we learn George Washington was the first president. We learn, about things like the Second World War, and we learn about the Cold War, and we learn about things like John F. Kennedy's assassination and stuff like that, the formulation of the Constitution. But in the church world these days, we treat it like the Book of Acts and then Billy Graham. I'm not wrong. and we ignore 1950 years of development and what I would consider our older siblings in the faith. And so when you ignore all of that, when you ignore guys like Augustine of Hippo in the late 300s, early 400s, or Jonathan Edwards in the 1700s, you're ignoring a wealth of not just information, but joy, really. And Edwards influenced, the guy who inspired my flagship overdrive, the Piper Drive, John Piper. John Piper just repeats whatever Jonathan Edwards says. So
student
it was
of the game, people. Student of the game.
Exactly. So it really came down to, well, and this isn't to insult anybody or to bash anybody, but when I was formulating the brand of Westminster Effects, Westminster is a reference to the 1646 Westminster Confession of Faith. Even though I'm not Presbyterian, I actually ascribe to the Second London Baptist Confession of Faith, which is basically the Westminster with a couple of things tweaked. Yeah, they basically plagiarized it, and it's awesome.
They modified the circuitry, so to speak.
Well, that's actually how I named the 1689 overdrive. It's a tube screamer style, so it takes something great, makes it better. So,
got it.
Yeah,
got it.
So that's how nerdy I am.
This is clever. This is clever.
But what I kept seeing in whether it was a forum or even in person, I saw so many church musicians who they're not reading, one, their Bibles, which they should be reading, or two, anything in particular. It was just going off of their feelings. And so a lot of these models are based off of, hey, like, you would benefit from this guy. You would really benefit from reading Edwards or Piper or Chrysostom or Martin Luther or whoever. And so it was both honoring those guys, except when I get a little satirical, which we can talk about later. So that it's both honoring, but at the same time kind of nudging people like, hey, these guys are awesome, and you should pay attention to what they've said. Because they've been saying a lot of awesome stuff for a really long time. And when I look at the modern church world, and particularly the music world, it's nothing but feeling. And it's both. Christianity is absolutely a both and. It's not just a head thing. It's not just a heart thing. It's both informing each other, right? So that's really kind of where that came from, and it's just kind of expanded. And I have people in churches all over the place playing these things, and then I have guys in bar bands and whatever playing these, and that's just fine too. You don't have to ascribe to anything to sound good.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And to the point of you saying, there's obviously connections with how you name your products, and ultimately hoping, like, you would benefit from researching that. I don't know exactly if I had articulated this to you guys in the demo that I did of the Chrysostom, but I know I did say to you, like, if you don't know what it is, Google it and go ahead and do that. But I definitely did that in the stages of, I was trying to figure out how am I going to title this video? What am I going to do for the thumbnail? Like, is there any way that I can connect that heritage in those aspects of the video? I didn't really come up with anything that I really thought was good, but it was definitely like, wow, this is just really interesting reading. Obviously, along with anything that you research that's historical and any sort of figure of any sort of prominence, and it doesn't matter how old they are in the human history, there's going to be parts of it that are certainly you read about things that they either said or things that they did that you're like, I don't necessarily know if I agree with that. There were some things about Chrysostom that definitely like threw me for a loop, just because it's like, but it was a different time. It's a different era. I wouldn't say those things personally. But at the end of the day, I think what you were getting at with it, and one of the things that I want to get into, because there was a little bit of controversy around your artwork choices.
Oh, man.
Was just the idea of how John Chrysostom was a guy who essentially fought against and basically chastised people for abusing their authority within the church. And as someone who grew up, I didn't go to church as a kid, but I did go to an Episcopalian school where we were made to go to chapel services twice a week or every day of the week. There was a very strict order to it. And there were definitely points where it was like, we're this Episcopalian school, but I feel like the student body is just completely doesn't care about that being the foundation of it. And nor do I feel like the families sending their kids to this school really feel like having that as a foundation is any importance. It's just a private school with a great reputation.
Right. It's a way to get them out of the public school system because there's concerns about safety or quality or what have you.
Exactly. So for me, just that idea of exercising against authority was something that I could relate to as someone who has had his brushes with figures of authority and been, spurned and less than thrilled with them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I've done the same thing. Like I am by nature a rule follower, but if I think a rule is stupid, I tend to let people know. and I've been more brash about that in the past than I am now. And actually throughout the history of Christianity, you see that happening. So my tap tremolo is named after Martin Luther, where the joke there is, he nailed the 95 Theses on the Wittenberg chapel door.
And when you tap the tremolo, that's like him hammering the nails?
Yeah, the graphic is a hammer right above the tap.
Oh, okay. All right.
So it's with the sale of indulgences and stuff like that, where Luther was like, no, this isn't right. And we're not going to have it. And he's like, let's talk about this. And then people basically said, nah, shut up, man.
Sorry, I had to plug in my laptop.
Oh, you're good. Totally understand.
Like, oh crap! I forgot to plug it in.
Oh, so that is kind of for everything to just keel over in the middle of this.
Yeah, right. Don't want that to happen. Oh, more people joining in. JJ's House of Jams is here. Great to see you. There's some good conversation going on. We got Kyle Daly joining us in there. That's awesome. Welcome to the show. I don't believe I've seen you here in the chat, but it's great to have you guys. I do want to point out something that Sam Jones said. I think this is kind of funny. The power of Calvin's teaching compresses my guitar signal way better.
You are not wrong. You are not wrong.
I think that's funny. And then Russell Mania has a great observation. The church is a hospital. Everyone is in repair. I think that's a really nice sentiment. I think for me, it definitely feels a bit like that. Especially right now, it's just a great way for me to bring my spirits up to the point where I'm even helping out when I can. which is something that I would not have done years ago. You spend a few years working in a church. After a while, you're just like, once you quit, you're like, don't bother me with helping out in this.
Right. Right. Yeah. And church burnout is a very real thing. And he's absolutely right, where we're all works in progress. None of us is the final product yet. I would actually even go a step farther, and pardon any crudeness, but you could make the case the church is actually more of a funeral home, where Ephesians talks about, you are dead in trespasses and sins, but God, being rich in mercy, has made us alive in Christ. So it's absolutely where we are being improved. We're all hypocrites. People talk about, the church is full of hypocrites. I'm like, yeah, join the club. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But
I definitely do agree with you on that sentiment. And by the way, JJ, drive safe. Don't get into an accident on our account.
Oh boy.
Can't have that on my conscience.
Yeah, only listen. Don't actually look at this. That'll end poorly. But
don't comment.
Yeah, I mean, I would make the case, and I think I can make it consistently, that Scripture talks more about, the person who is unsaved is dead. Like we hate God, and we're dead to the things of God, and then God makes us alive by grace through faith, and so it's even beyond a hospital. It's almost like a funeral home, where it's the opposite. The opposite happening. And, we're not putting people in the ground immediately. They're actually bouncing out of the casket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. We did allude to it, and I want to share this with everybody, because I made mention of it in the Chrysostom demo, that if they choose to buy one of those chorus pedals from you, it's not exactly going to look like what mine looks like, and I feel kind of special that I get one of the first run, but there was definitely some poor timing, not like you could have predicted it, but you did have some rather incendiary interactions with people based on your artwork choices for the Chrysostom.
Yeah, and I got it from both sides of the argument, so I guess that means I really did something right?
I guess so. That was the most surprising thing to me. I thought for sure you'd get it from one side versus the other, but the fact that you got it from both angles is like, wow.
Yeah. So and I have a tendency to do that. I have a good friend here in Greenville who named Corey Truax, and he does a podcast, and he's actually on talk radio on the weekends when it airs. But look up the Corey Truax show, and he makes the point, like, what I'm about to say here will anger everybody. He's like, I will anger you on this side and you on this side. And he's like, and I'm gonna bring it all back home and all that good stuff. And he does a really good job of analyzing like the entire spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. And should I just go ahead and get into how that all happened?
Yeah, sure. If you're comfortable with it, go for it.
Yeah. I mean, I've already owned My Chemical Romance, and
right. So what could it hurt,
Right. So my graphics guy, Ben, hit him up at West Georgia Cornhole. The guy does killer work there, but he also does my graphics and printing and whatnot. And he came up with this really cool graphic for the Chrysostom, and it happens. Well, the original, at least, happened to have a yellow fist. And then, what was it? A week and a half later, George Floyd was killed. Mm-hmm. And then all of that erupted. And so that was getting conflated with, does this have something to do with, Black Lives Matter and stuff like that? And the intention was never to make a political statement out of it. It was to celebrate the fact that John Chrysostom was calling out corrupt clergy way back in the day. I think it was in the 300s.
Yeah, I might be really, really early.
And that was never the intention. The really the only political statement I make with Westminster Effects is Jesus is King, much like Kanye.
Yes, right. You even did it in the album's color scheme.
I did. I totally ran with that, and I did not get sued. I was not threatened with litigation.
Very nice.
Have you heard that story with the Chick-fil-A before?
No.
So there's this shoulder, that right there in the frame.
Yes.
The original Chick-fil-A artwork was kind of on the nose. And I have a lawyer friend who tells me that technically I'm covered by satire law, but I got an email from their intellectual property lawyer. I guess it's about a year and a half ago, and he said, "Hey, I'm a Chick-fil-A's intellectual property lawyer, and we have some concerns." He's like, "If it's okay, I'd like to call you, and we'll keep everything cordial, and we'll just kind of go from there." And obviously, they can't do anything about the name or the color scheme. He's like, my client really would like for that logo to change. We had 2 conversations. They were actually really cool about everything. One of his lines that he said was, "We prefer to make friends if we can help it." He's like, because they deal with everybody from mom bloggers putting their logo on bibs, like custom embroidered bibs or whatever, and then they deal with the guys printing out fake coupons. So that's the other end of that spectrum, and obviously you need to clamp down on it. So he's like, we deal with all of this kind of stuff. He's like, we'd really appreciate it if you change the artwork and whatever. And then we did a podcast episode on it, and I talked about how cordial and cool they were about everything, and I actually mentioned that the bacon at Chick-fil-A is actually worth eating. Most fast food bacon is trash. It's all floppy. There's no substance. Yeah, there's not even really any taste. It's just not worth it. Like, don't bother. But Chick-fil-A's bacon is actually pretty awesome. And so I don't remember what executive that letter is from, but he thanked me for, basically not being a douchebag about the whole thing. And they sent me coupons for like a new bacon barbecue chicken sandwich that they were doing a test run on or something like that. So, not only did I get, I think, improved artwork, I got free food out of it. Thanks, Chick-fil-A.
Oh, I love it. That is amazing. And
so stand-up guys there at Chick-fil-A.
The only bad part about it is the fact that every time you want Chick-fil-A, it's closed.
Right.
I don't know why I always want Chick-fil-A on a Sunday.
Yeah, especially like after church, like I get there at 7:30 right now to do like a run through for our set, and right now with the illness that shall not be named, we're running 2 services to help spread everybody out. Right. So a rehearsal and 2 sets, so playing everything 4 times ultimately. And it's like, man, some Chick-fil-A would be awesome right now. It's like, but I can't. No. That's why we can't have nice things. Well, actually, I actually kind of commend them for being closed on Sunday. I'm actually not going to complain too hard.
What I really liked, we've been living down here in Orange County now for about 10 years. And for the first 3 to 4 years, we didn't have Chick-fil-A in California, period. And then when they moved in, it just happened that it was one of the first ones in Southern California, and it was very close to our house. But what I really loved about them coming in and establishing their restaurant was I know people have their opinions on Chick-fil-A and the way that they play their politics with their faith. But what I loved about it is that the majority of the guys and girls that I saw working the counters were all young kids. And like, not just a bunch of like typical Orange County white kids. Like there were Mexican kids, there were black kids, there were white kids, there were kids like young under 18 able to get a job with these guys. And I remember being that age and being told like, go get a job. Mm-hmm. It's like, but nowhere's going to hire me. Well, Chick-fil-A gave him a job. And like one girl, she worked there the entire time that she was going to college, and it was great for her. So
I remember they actually have a pretty solid scholarship program there too, where if you work for them for however long, then they'll contribute to you going to college. And one of the things that makes their atmosphere so much better than most fast food is yes, they will hire the young kids, and they'll really hire anybody, but you have to behave. Like you have to actually act like you want to be there. And and the it's become a joke, but when they tell you my pleasure and they don't just kind of like look at you like you're wasting their time, like it makes you want to eat there more. It's a nicer experience.
Yeah, definitely. Kyle says, don't get me started on that In-N-Out. I'm Texan. That stuff is gross.
Dang it, Kyle.
Kyle, thanks for the comment, but I will just say I'm Californian. Don't get me started on Whataburger. That stuff is gross.
Look, if anybody isn't familiar with this, go look up the Beacon. So it's this restaurant about 25 minutes away from me. And the Beacon actually used to have a billboard in California that said you're 3,000 and whatever miles away from the world famous Beacon. And so there have been presidents that have come to the Beacon and whatever. And this old guy, his name was JC. I think he actually passed a couple years ago, but he worked the counter forever. He was half blind. Wow. And he would yell at you. He would say, talk. And you gave him your order and he would go, walk. And he'd turn around and and no idea what he ever said, but somehow your order popped out at the end of the line.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's just grease on top of grease. But their big thing is you get, a cheeseburger or whatever. And then you say a plenty, and a plenty means your burger or sandwich or whatever is literally covered in fries and onion rings. Like you have to dig through a pile of the fries and onion rings to get to this super greasy burger that's going to feel like a brick when it hits your stomach. But it's amazing. It's really a cultural experience here in South Carolina.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to use this phrase. The fat kid in me is like having an episode right now.
We'll come to South Carolina. We'll go to the Beacon.
Can't go anywhere right now.
Make sure you're feeling a quart low first, though.
Okay, gotcha. I guess Kyle and I are going to be fighting.
Yeah, I mean, I fight with Kyle with my circuit boards, and you can fight with him about burgers.
Oh man, that's funny.
Hey, Brian Morse is here. What's up, Brian?
Oh, there we go.
We have a running joke with Brian on our podcast where we have a listener question section, and every single episode he submits like 6 or 7 questions, and I have to boil it down to 2. So and here's Brian Morris, as is tradition, with another question, and it's awesome. We actually had him on as a guest recently too, so that was a lot of fun.
Nice, very cool. We kind of talked about you having a little bit of a backlash with the Chrysostom artwork, and it kind of makes me curious if whether or not, I don't know how everybody else feels, but I know personally, I've certainly felt like when I tell people like, yeah, I'm watching church online, or like I'm going to church and it feels really good, I often get sort of the sort of that look from people. Yeah. And I'm curious to know if, because there's such a connection with your faith, church history, and Westminster, if you've just received any sort of flack for that association, just in general.
Oh yeah. I have a couple of times. It's actually very, very rare from any other pedal builders.
Well, that's good to hear.
That's only happened once, and he was basically trying to bait me into like cussing him out or something like that. I don't even know what that was about. But yeah, I mean, most of the other pedal builders, we can discuss things and whatever. Yeah. But yeah, every now and then, we get some kind of something where maybe on one of the podcast posts, it's like, why is religion showing up in my feed? It's like, just keep scrolling, bro.
Yeah.
Why do you care if just scroll? But anyway.
On that subject of your podcast, for those of you who don't know, Cody does have a podcast that's sort of co-branded with Westminster Effects, but it's not strictly a guitar podcast, and it's not strictly a music podcast. I did spend some time listening to a few of those episodes just to kind of get a feel for what exactly they talk about. And although there definitely is a connection with music and there is a connection with, the company, it's much more about the way that I guess I could describe it is to me, it feels like being able to create a healthy environment within the church as a whole. Not just your church, just a healthy environment for everybody to be in where people can feel welcomed. But at the same time, if this is something that you want to grow into and discover more about, that you can do so comfortably.
Right. Yeah. So the intention originally with, we call it the Westminster Effects Doxology podcast. So doxology being a theological term for worship. And the intention was to create a worship leading podcast that would go a little bit deeper. There's tons of worship leading podcasts and YouTube channels, and a lot of them either they just scratch the surface and really just kind of stay there, or they only talk about production and stuff like that, or they're just nuts. and that's not to insult anybody. It's just they don't have a very good grasp on scripture and what's involved with that. So the intention was to start a worship leading podcast. So I got my pastor, the lead pastor at my church, Resurrection Church in Greer, South Carolina, if anybody's interested. So that's Bradley, and he actually got his start in ministry with worship leading. And then that morphed into him being a lead pastor who also occasionally leads worship. Okay. And then my friend John Ross, or Lutheran John, as we occasionally call him, Lutheran guy in Nebraska that, we met each other through Facebook, and he's helped me out with NAMM a couple of times. So I actually have met him in person. You actually met him that night at the pedal builder.
That's right. Yes.
And so, we talk about, what's going on in the church world, or concepts out there. Where we just recorded an episode today where Bradley had been on a sabbatical for 3 weeks to kind of hit the reset button and stuff like that. So we just talked about the need to rest and unplug sometimes. We'll break down song lyrics. Like, is this really biblical? Stuff like that. Or, this guy said this thing. What do we think about it? And sometimes we're all on board. Other times we actually disagree. Like Bradley and I are coming at it from a more generally reformed or reformed Baptist slant, where John is a confessional Lutheran, and so we're going to disagree about some stuff like Lutherans baptize babies, and Bradley and I disagree with that, but we're not going to murder each other over it, Right. And so we've had Presbyterians and Southern Baptists and etc. On as guests, and it's always a really good time, and every now and then the guests will just outright tell us that we're wrong, and it's fun.
Oh man,
and I'm actually friends with that guy, and we get a kick out of that every now and then. Like, hey, remember that time you came on my podcast and told me how wrong we were about this?
That's so good. But a couple things. First off, the church that I worked at for 3 years, and I was running sound and video stuff and whatnot, was actually called Resurrection Church.
Nice.
And it
Sorry
was
to bring up bad memories.
no bad. Oh, please, no bad memories. Just a lot of burnout. But I was one of 3 white people in an all black church, right on the border of Compton and Carson.
Oh wow!
It was great. It was great times, man. It was great.
Yeah, I've spent a very small amount of time in Compton. If the most recent episode that we released was with our other pastor on staff who's leaving to plant a church about 30 minutes away, and we're actually doing a special edition overdrive to help support that effort.
Oh, very cool.
And he headed up several years worth of short-term missions things with the Dream Center in Los Angeles. And so taking food out to Compton, or we actually did some sessions on Skid Row, handing out food and water and stuff like that,
cool.
praying with people. And that was an experience. Like we're so isolated from that in suburbia and such, and to see those kind of conditions, it's like, wow, this really is real. and these people really do need help and stuff like that. And so, yeah, very, very little experience in Compton, but I've actually been around there.
Yeah. It's really an interesting, and obviously, not to get too much into the weeds about the current world situation, and obviously with your fallout from the artwork of Chrysostom, but it's like you spend a lot of time around that community, and you can't help but like want to be there for them. You can't help but want to be a part of it. And I think one of the things that was so great for me was it was the first time in my life that I had been around people where faith wasn't just you clocked in and out. It was a thing that helped them through the day to day. And so it was nice to, albeit there were definitely those that like, we need to please stop talking Christian at me. Talk to me like a normal person.
Yeah. No, I feel it. Like there's definitely room to have the terms, obviously, and there's obviously going to be, certain languages that develop around certain cultures and stuff like that. But if all it is platitudes and it never gets into actually doing something, we kind of have an entire book, the book of James, where it's like, hey, you tell me that you believe, now prove it. Act like it. Right? Totally. It's what good is it to just tell someone, hey, be warm and fed? That's useless. Like just the thought of that. It's like the what was it? Marie Antoinette, who was reported to say, "Let them eat cake," when they had no bread. There's just like such a disconnect between your head and reality, where the Christian faith, yes, it is rooted in historical fact, things that actually happened, realities that impact all of history and all that, and that means that we need to live in light of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes total sense. Well, with that in mind, as we start to get into the last little bit of our time together, I want to talk about the future. What exactly you're hoping, what you're either working on, if you feel like sharing with the folks watching, what you're excited about that you're formulating, how you see Westminster and Nose at the same time growing. And is there anything in particular that you think those watching that might not be all too familiar with your brands, what you think would be the best way to start to get to know what you guys do?
Yeah. So to get to know us, we're on Instagram and Facebook, just Westminster Effects, westminstereffects.com. And you can also subscribe on iTunes and Spotify. The Westminster Effects Doxology podcast. You can find links to all that kind of stuff on the website too. So for the future, I guess we'll just go ahead and announce it now. So you get the exclusive, I guess. Is we're working toward releasing the Geneva Amp Sim version 2. I won't show the circuit board. I'm not really a gut shot guy. I don't really publicize that kind of stuff. And Kyle will probably comment about the reason for that being the fact that so many of my early builds were so ugly, which is fine. That's fine, Kyle. Be that way. But the Geneva Amp Sim version 2 is meant as, I kind of call it my answer to the Helix. Okay. Right. Because so many church guys, they can't run an amp. Or maybe their church can't afford an entire amp room or ISO cabs or whatever, so they have to run direct. And so the Geneva Amp Sim is all analog. It uses JFET transistors in place of where the tubes would be, and it simulates all analog a Vox AC30 style circuit. It has a cab sim and it has an active DI, so you actually don't even need a direct box with it. You plug your XLR right into this pedal. And it can run clean, it can run edge of breakup, it can run full-blown AC30 top boost deliciousness. And it's a really good pedal platform. And if you want to hear version 1, you can really just look at any of our YouTube channels. If you look up Westminster Effects, we have a series called Will It PDubs, where I take any and all guitar gear and I run it through my stuff and see if it will work for modern church music. Usually the answer is yes. every now and then it's like, maybe a little bit. Maybe you'll have to work with it. Yeah, you might have to like slap it around a little bit. but usually it'll work. But for all of those, I'm using the Geneva Amp Sim, and I'm working towards some cover songs with the Geneva, even to show that it can handle high gain tones and stuff like that.
Very cool.
So yeah, that's what we're working toward in the nearest future, and really excited about that. Also, one other thing that we're kind of doing is I think I have permission to share this. If not, whatever. So they can deal with it. It's okay. So I've partnered with. This is one of the really cool things about the music industry is nobody sees each other as competition, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. So I've partnered with my friends at Ghostfire. So David down in Atlanta, and then Lyman Guitar Company, literally 10 minutes down the road from me. They've owned a music store forever and ever, and I've known them basically that long. But they also now have their own guitar line, and we're all kind of co-distributing. Cool. So if you are a retailer out there, and maybe you don't even want pedals, but you want really good cables or some really good value guitars, hit me up, and I can, and like we're all repping each other, and we're all putting each other's stuff on our site. So all of our sites can also be more of a one-stop. Like, hey, grab your cables and go ahead and get a guitar too. And so those both brands, like, they're really close friends of mine, and it's always a lot of fun to work with them, and we're really beefing up those efforts too.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, we've been talking a little bit about the Geneva since we really got back in touch after the virus kind of killed everything. And as someone who murdered it, just killed everything, just all gone, everything gone. But that's something that I definitely, the whole direct situation is a very popular choice for not just the worship musician, but just musicians in general these days, as the touring budgets get smaller and smaller, and the pedal boards have to seemingly get bigger and more populated, but they have to be lighter.
Right.
It's kind of nice that there will be certain options, because there's definitely, we were talking off camera about people advocating for the use of a Kemper. For me, that's just absolute overkill.
Sure.
I don't need that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's like, if I got a well-stocked pedal board with some really good options that I can get a decent amount of versatility out of it, that is much more my speed, much more my style, and much closer to what I would rather do, because it's closest to what I do normally.
Right.
But now we've touched on all these other things, but something that I think is kind of interesting as I was listening to your podcast is not only do you play guitar, your wife plays as well. And I saw some of the videos that you've posted, and she's very, very good. What I think is kind of cool is that you're not just like, you're not one of these guys that lives in his church world. You have like, you're talking about being in metal, being into emo, and being into bands that, for some people that live in the church world, it's like, if you like a band that isn't Christian music, they give you a look. Sure. But it's kind of cool that I can tell from some of the gear that you like to check out on your Will It PDubs series that you like things a little on the hefty side.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what kind of bands are you into right now, as far as like that heavier side of music that doesn't necessarily find too much of a home in the music world?
Right. So I've absolutely been just killing Architects lately. Okay. They do both the really, really heavy and the really, really ambient. And that's just so much fun, where you can, and that's kind of what my band does too, where, we'll have this breakdown and then kind of the electronic spacey kind of thing at the same time. And being able to blend those, I've always thought was really fun. I've also been on a little bit of an Animals as Leaders kick. Cool. You just can't go wrong with that, right?
Yeah, it's really hard to not be drawn into that. I for a while was not a little apprehensive about getting into it, but once I dove into it, it was like, yeah, there's some stuff to be gleaned from here.
Right. And, lately I've been listening to a decent amount of Coheed and Cambria.
Cool.
So here's a fun story about them. The first time I ever heard them was in high school, and it was also the first time I ever heard Thrice, where Coheed and Thrice opened for Thursday way back in the day. Yeah, when Thursday was touring on their War All the Time album, and that was the first time I had ever heard, not just like period. I hadn't listened to any CDs, what are CDs anymore? But that was the first time I'd ever heard Coheed or Thrice, and I was just blown away.
Nice.
And that honestly kind of revolutionized my musical taste, for a long, long time. I'll also give a shout out to a couple of my artists, AJ and Alexia in Eyes Set to Kill, where that's one of the really cool things about being in the music industry is my wife was helping me with that first summer NAMM that I did, and she ran into Alexia from Eyes Set to Kill, and she's like, "Oh, hey, we've been listening to you for like 10 years. Come to my husband's booth and try out some of his stuff."
Nice. Very cool.
So we've gotten to hang out with them a couple of times and send them pedals, and they give me a shout out every now and then. And, that's just one of the cool things is, listening to people for that long, and all of a sudden they're using your stuff on tour.
Yeah.
What?
Definitely.
How'd that happen?
Total mind melting kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I'll also plug my band, since my wife and I play in the same band. We both play guitar. We're called Igniting the Sky. It's been a long time since we've released anything, but we're working on that. We've been working on this. We were going to make it a full blown concept album, but it'll be 2 EPs just to make it easier. And and this won't surprise you with the theme of the concept album, but it's it's the story of Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation in science fiction format.
Wow.
So
forget about the Gilgamesh Catholics. Sorry, I couldn't help it. I had to go there.
That's actually how my wife and I got together. Was she tried out for a really terrible band that we were in, and then I dumped a girlfriend for her, and the rest is history.
Nice.
It all worked out. So
yeah. Well, viewers of the channel know that me and my wife met at MI in Hollywood. So our relationship was forged in the fires of music. So
yeah, I think you told me about that in Anaheim.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing when you have somebody in your life, either a spouse or a significant other, that is kind of in it as much as you're in it. It leads to some very intriguing, I don't want to say marital problems, because they're not problems. It's really just more, there's a different kind of discussion that goes on within your household that other households will never get.
Right. And it can involve anything from, hey, you really need to tune, or it could be, hey, I really have gas right now, and I don't mean the kind that can be fixed medicinally. It's the kind that we might need to shell out some money for, and we're both capable of getting it.
Yeah, exactly.
Thankfully, I built some of that stuff.
Exactly. And it's one of those things that, like, as you said, it's so great to be part of this industry, because you get to know people, and then sometimes they just will give you the stuff that you want. And then sometimes they'll give you really, 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 really good discounts on it.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say about that, because I'm staring at one of those really, really, really good discounts right now.
Oh yeah,
I love that guitar so much. I don't know if you've played Chad Jennings guitars at all. Oh,
yes.
Dude.
Yeah, I actually briefly met Chad at NAMM this year, if I recall correctly. That week was a blur.
Yes.
Yes, I did. And he actually left one of his guitars at the Stompbox exhibit for a little bit. So I only played it for about 5 minutes because I didn't want to ruin everything. But man, that guitar was amazing.
Yeah, Chad's on top of his game right now.
Yeah.
He's working on some things that I'm super excited about, but he built me one of his navigators, and it was actually used in the Chrysostom demo, that white telly that I was using.
Yeah.
Oh God, that thing is just so good. Oh, that's a guitar.
And it sounded delicious.
Oh, sounds so good. I had I just want to preface this before I say this with a story. In college, I had a teacher who taught sort of a music business class focused on writing and networking. And he used to tell stories about people that he would meet because he did a lot of interviews with some famous songwriters and producers and, recording industry types. And he was talking about meeting this one particular songwriter, and it did not go as great as he would have hoped it would go. And he described it in this phrase, and it stuck with me all these years. That woman did not put the love of Jesus into my heart. And he's a gay man, and but he's just this beautiful human being who just has this really great gift for teaching these really abstract concepts. And I loved his class. He was such a wonderful person. He still is a wonderful person. But that quote every time I meet someone
not put the love of Jesus.
That rubs me the wrong way, or if I have something that it's just the experience is just so wonderful that it gives me that feeling of like that person did not put the love of Jesus into my heart.
Yeah, and here in the South, we just say "bless your heart."
Oh, bless your heart.
Yeah, and it usually means the exact opposite of "bless your heart."
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Now there are times, depending on the context, where they actually do mean that. If you're at a funeral, oh, bless your heart.
Yeah. Right.
And but most of the time, it's oh, bless your heart. You are a moron. Kind of thing.
Oh, I love it. Oh man. Well, let's talk a little bit about some more gear as we kind of wrap things up. And if you guys watching have some questions for Cody about really anything that we've been talking about, please feel free to use the chat. I don't know how you are on time. Are you okay?
Yeah.
All right, no problem. So what are you playing mostly these days in terms of guitars?
Well, I mentioned Lyman Guitar Company
right
earlier in the show, and I was one of their guinea pigs a couple of years ago for some of their custom stuff, and they built me this beautiful white Telecaster, and they were never happy with the neck, so they just replaced the neck for me. Wow. And totally redid everything, and now they have one of those laser engraving machines, so they laser engraved the headstock logo and the serial number, and I had a custom inlay on the original neck, but with the current necks, they weren't able to do that. So they did it on the back of the headstock, and it's the Chi Rho symbol. It's an ancient Christian symbol. It looks like a P and an X.
I guess I did learn about that in history class, and my teacher called it the Kifo symbol, but Chi Rho makes sense. Yeah, I know it.
Yeah. So that's on the back, and I had, because I got a tinker, right? So I had Duncan quarter pound pickups in that, and I never really melded with those, never really gelled. So I put Fender Yosemite pickups with the 4-way switch. So it's pickups that they have in the American Performer.
Right.
And I actually just put those in today. Nice. And I'm just loving this guitar all over again. Like, gorgeous guitar. So they stained it. It's an ash body. They stained it black and sanded it back down, so the grain is still dark, and then stained white over it with a black pickguard, maple neck, and fretboard. It's awesome.
Cool.
And then I've really kind of fallen in love with this guitar behind me all over again. That's a pretty old Gibson Faded Flying V.
Oh, I do remember those.
2002 or 2003. It has a Duncan JB and a Porter H90 in it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, the original pickups actually just like kicked the bucket on me years ago. So that is my baby. That's my first real guitar. Nice. And we got a question. We call our question section in the podcast the Inquisition. And
nobody expects it.
Exactly. And so we got a question of, I think it was actually from Brian Morris, as is tradition, where he asked what our favorite piece of musical gear was. And so I picked up that guitar again, and it's my main. So don't get me wrong; it's not like it's been hanging there forever, and I just never touch it.
Mhm.
And I was just like, man, this guitar really is all that awesome. And I've had this guitar so long, I was like, I wonder if I could just like close my eyes on these parts and nail it, like the fretboard placement and all that. And it was just like, yeah, like that's how familiar I've gotten with that guitar over 17, 18 years.
Very
And
cool.
and so that thing is my baby, my go-to. I'll do a shameless plug for one of my pedals.
Plug
My go-to for all things hefty is the Osteen Distortion version 2, which sometimes causes a little bit of a ruckus.
Just a
but
little bit.
just a little bit, because I hate the prosperity gospel, and I'm going to make fun of it.
Praise Jesus. I remember the first time the pastor of the church that I worked at was talking about the different gospels that people preach. And when he got to prosperity, he just kind of glossed over it for a little bit. And then I was like, so what exactly is prosperity gospel? And as he explains it to me, I'm just like, what?
Yeah, right.
What?
That's not the same at all.
No.
Yeah. Everybody go watch the documentary American Gospel. It's on Netflix. It takes some shots at the prosperity gospel while also promoting the real one, and it's really well done. It's got some of my favorite preachers in there. So go enjoy that.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. Dude, it'll wreck you. It's awesome.
Oh man, I don't need more things to wreck me right now.
In a good way.
Okay, in a good way. Wreck me in a good way.
It won't just punch you in the gut. It'll give you a hug afterward too.
Okay, well, as long as I get a hug.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
So what about amps?
So amps, at church, my church owns an AC-15 that we run into a Jet City ISO 2. And I just love Vox style amps, obviously with the Geneva, stuff like that. And then personally at home, I have a Marshall DSL 20 head with the angled vertical 212 cab. And that has let me see if I can remember, a V30 in the bottom. No, not a V30. It's something else, Celestian. But then an Eminence governor in the top.
Okay.
And so really good balanced tone. And I run it relatively clean. And get everything I need out of it with pedals, but just the way that it reacts when I'm playing high gain stuff is just, it'll tear your face off, but it'll clean up enough to where it's really pretty on the ambient parts. And my wife actually does the same thing. She runs a Marshall DSL 40 combo.
Okay.
And but she's actually picky enough that she does not use the Osteen distortion for her main high gain. She actually uses a Friedman BEOD.
Well,
all right. So, but hey, I mean, I'd rather her be a little bit picky than just say, yeah, give me whatever and I'll make it work.
Yeah, right. Yeah, definitely. That definitely would be an interesting, obviously astute viewers of the channel will remember my infamous Stompbox Smackdowns. That would certainly be an interesting Smackdown if we got an Osteen from you, and then I actually have some viewers may remember I got a pedal from Russia called the Fisherman, and it's basically a BEOD, but it has a cute little scuba cat as the artwork for it. So, that could easily be something that, if you guys wanted to see it, let us know, and maybe we can make something happen.
We can make that happen. We can absolutely make that happen. But hey, I mean, I'll just say this. It's kind of hot that my wife has some of the best tone in the area. So, I'm just saying. She does run my compressor, and she does run a couple of my other pedals too. So I'm not totally absent from her board.
You'll take the loss on the one for the rest of it.
By all means.
Nice. Very cool. Now, would you say that a lot of the stuff that you make kind of populates your board?
Yeah. So in terms of drives, absolutely. Especially because I run my Zwingli SDD 3K. It emulates the Korg SDD 3000 rack mount delay preamp section.
Okay.
So that's just a little color, a little bit of a just enough, just a little more oomph kind of thing. That's always on. And then I run the Piper drive, Edwards overdrive, which is a blues breaker style. And then I currently have the Physician, which is kind of a Landgraf style. And then the Osteen distortion. So I have 4 different drive pedals. And then, the Chrysostom. But then, other than that, I do run the Chalcedonian dual reverb. So it has both a spring and a hall in that. And it's fun to stack those. But I also run an RV5 on modulate and cranked. You can't beat that tone, right?
Those older Boss reverbs, despite the fact that they may not have the kind of fidelity that a lot of the modern reverbs have, like I grew up a big Incubus fan, so at one point Mike Einziger had the RV5. It was the delay reverb, the combo one.
RV3, I think.
Okay, yeah, it was may have been that, but it was the digital reverb delay, and I've come across those like here and there. But I'm just so amazed every time I come across one that it's just like the price is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But then you play it and you're like, oh, this is just, I get why so many people love this. It's got this just very distinctive kind of sound.
Right.
But I don't know if I want to pay $250 for it.
Right. Yeah. And then I run a Line 6 M5 as kind of a catch-all for modulation. And some extra reverb sounds. There are some really fun reverb sounds on that. And then for delay, I run a Strymon timeline because I run the Boss ES8 to switch all of that. It's got the MIDI switching and with having both a post-hardcore band and playing in church, it just lets me have all of that in one setup. And I like to have delay presets for every song, so I don't have to worry about tapping, because so much modern church stuff is so heavy on like the U2 dotted eighth type of sound, and we play to a click at church, which I think is really helpful. But at the same time, it's like I don't want to have to tap in on every song, so it's just okay, ES8, do your thing, and then boom, it's on that song, and that really just kind of becomes part of my my preparation routine is, all right, load the preset if it's an old song, make a preset if it's a new one, and it really kind of helps me invest in that song a little more of really finding, well, maybe the tutorial had this kind of sound, but I can tweak it a little more this way for our context, and it'll work a little better that way, and or do it exactly that way and just feel more confident with it,
Yeah, definitely.
And that's one of the really cool things about the instrument, right? Is our other guy that plays electric at church runs a Helix. He used to play some of my stuff, and then he betrayed me. But he runs the Helix. He sounds fine. I run traditional pedals and an amp, isolated of course, and it all sounds fine. And nobody's killing each other, but there's so many different philosophies with, gain stacking, and, do you do on the ambient parts, do you stack delays or do you stack reverbs or both or whatever? And there's just so much stuff to explore, and it's almost like there's no right answer or no wrong answer a lot of times, which you just start exploring, and that's just a whole lot of fun.
Right. The exploration of it, no matter what kind of sound design you're doing, whether you're doing it in, like my context, is kind of what you were talking about earlier, that very dynamic between like the nice, pretty kind of ambient-ish part and then just really full force, heavy kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff that we've been trying to gear ourselves toward. And I have a lot of fun coming up with sounds for that. But then in worship as well. But then at the same time, like you see within these certain realms of music, it's, I made the joke to the guitar player at the church that I've been going to, It's like, oh, I see you have a few of the P and W stalwarts and the usual suspects. Yep. You got your mostly Strymon loaded pedal board.
Yep.
You
Probably a Morning Glory.
There was actually no Morning Glory.
Oh man, that's heresy.
There
Burn
was
him at the stake for that.
Oh, there was a Bluesbird style overdrive, though.
Okay, good.
You know, and let's see. I saw for a while that the Walrus Audio Julia was a real big worship hit.
Yep.
He had one of those. But yeah, it is kind of weird. Like, no matter the world that we go into, although we love the idea of chasing tone and we love the idea of exploring our sound, there always seems to be this sort of pigeonholing that we end up becoming victim of.
Oh yeah, and you see it in every single genre. Like even like your traditional metal tones, it's, well, you're gonna have a dual rec or a JCM, and it's gonna be dirty and pushed by a TS9, right?
How many metal bands did we see in the early 2000s that were running PV 5150s?
Oh yeah, that too, and they all sounded fantastic, right? Like I have no qualms with the 5150, and but yeah, I mean, we all get into that, and it's like, oh, let's explore a little bit and see what happens, because there's a decent amount of higher gain bands that'll run something like a carbon copy or a DD5 or something like that to add a little texture on some lead parts, but at the same time, it's like, well, what if we did like a filtered delay on this part, and I do that on one of our songs, and it sounds pretty sweet, especially like once it backs off, because there's a part where that part just stops, and you just have drums and bass, so you kind of hear those filtered repeats in the background fading out, so there's always room to explore in music, and that's one of the really fun things.
Yeah, it's like I've been just inundated with stuff recently that's kind of, caused me to rethink a lot of the practices that I do. I've been trying to explore more of the ambient side of the playing, because it's just something that I find myself sitting alone in the studio, just really enjoying crafting these, not necessarily soundscapes, but just these sounds that just are so expressive and so all-encompassing. But at the same time, when you have these options, like I'm staring at a Walrus Audio Slow, which I absolutely love. But then I also really love the Chase Bliss Mood, because it is just so different than any of those other kind of typical washy reverbs. But then every once in a while, you need something that just kind of plays it on the straight and narrow, and it's like, well, I want a plate reverb, but it's kind of hard to justify 3 reverb pedals on the pedal board.
No, it's not. I can justify it. Yeah, so says this guy.
Says that guy.
But even getting into playing with the order of your effects, like if I remember correctly on the video that you did for the Chrysostom, you said that you like to run chorus before your drives, right?
Right. Yeah.
Which I've actually never tried to do that, so now I have to go try and see how that sounds in my rig, right?
Yeah.
Like I have to chase that tone now, and that's all your fault.
I'll take that. I'll take that. I'll take it. I'll accept the blame for that.
Okay. Just as long as we're clear on that part.
Oh yeah, we're clear, and I'm totally cool with it. I'll accept it. That makes me feel like I did my job.
Yeah. You did. I really enjoyed that video. So
thank you.
We'll get you some more stuff.
Yeah, man. I think this is going to be fun. It's been cool to, as I've gotten to know you, gotten to know the brand, and then start to work with some of this stuff. And then as I've tried to use this time that we've been sharing together to kind of bridge these two worlds of my life, one that has been a constant for me since I was a teenager, but then another world that I'm just starting to get to know. I'm trying to understand more about it and figure out where it fits into my life and how I can use it either as a way to better myself as a person, better the world that I live in, or even just, find comfort in times where I need that and I'm unable to get it from other sources. It's just really cool to know that, looking at what you guys do, it's cool to me that you guys own what you are. You're not afraid of it, because so many people whether they are of, the faith or not, they're afraid to be authentic these days because it can create a lot of, as you saw just with your Chrysostom artwork, whether you intend to have an effect negative or positive, you innately are going to receive some sort of backlash from somebody that has a problem with it.
Yep.
And so to me, it's just great to know that there are people out there that own who they are and are not afraid to be their authentic selves. And it's something that I've said here on the channel, and it's something that I hope a lot of you guys watching out there tonight are going to feel like you can do, is you can be authentic, and you can come to this community and you don't have to worry about us necessarily passing judgment. Obviously, there are some instances where if you choose to act a certain way, that we're going to have to tell you, look, either you one of my favorite quotes, as many viewers know, I'm a huge Twin Peaks fan. And I quote David Lynch's character, Gordon Cole, when I said, I told them, fix your hearts or die. And, well, we can't have some of the things that might be part of your authentic self, but at least if you're a guitar player and you enjoy the music and you enjoy that aspect, if we can agree on that, then you're welcome to join us, and no judgment will be passed. But you get a little naughty, then have to do something about it.
Yeah, and if we disagree on something, then we can do that charitably and not kill each other, right?
Exactly. As you disagree with people on your own podcast when it comes to something that, don't we all agree on this? No,
yeah.
You're wrong.
Nope. and I've even disagreed with my own pastor sometimes, where we haven't seen completely eye to eye, but it wasn't a totally fundamental thing. It's like, all right, cool. Mm-hmm. We can bat it around and have fun with it.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just have some fun with it. And in this, to kind of wrap things up, obviously we talked about your podcast, we talked about your companies. Just remind everybody where they can go to find out more about you guys, and also check out your podcast.
Yep. So westminstereffects.com. You can also look us up on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, Westminster Effects, for all of those. And if you want to listen to the podcast and hear the only pedal brand with a theology podcast, look up the Westminster Effects Doxology podcast, really wherever you listen to your podcast, whether it's iTunes, Spotify, Google, or no, it's not really iTunes anymore. It's Apple Podcasts, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Just look us up, Google it.
Yeah, Google it.
Look it up on Bing. I don't care. Just find us. Westminster Effects.
Look it up on Bing. Who looks up things up on Bing anyway?
I don't know. Well, it's probably on accident.
Yeah, of course. Well, one of the things that I do want to bring attention to as we close out our time together is one of the things that I found interesting listening to your podcast is towards the end of your episodes, you do some recommended readings, which I thought was really cool for someone who's kind of understanding this new aspect of his life. It's like, okay, if I want to learn something more, at least people are willing to say, like, if you're curious about this, go into it. So I want to actually ask you for a recommendation that you can give everybody watching right now. And it's a very specific recommendation. I would like you to make a recommendation to the skeptic, this person who's maybe dipping their toes in the water, but is still a little like, I don't know about this. I would like you to make a recommended reading for those that maybe want to get to know a little bit more about some of the things that, to you, what it means to be a Christian.
Let me Google this really quick to make sure I don't butcher it.
We are the most prepared interview you will watch all night, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, there we go. Okay, I got it right. So for reading for the skeptic, there's a couple of different approaches to take, right? Like there's evidence-based type of things. And that's fine to an extent. So something like Creator and the Cosmos by Hugh Ross. I'm a big fan of Reasons to Believe. You can look them up at reasons.org. But there's also a debate on YouTube between Gordon Stein, who was a skeptic, and Greg Bonson, who was a Christian apologist, and he takes the presuppositional approach. of basically saying, in order to make any moral claims of this thing is wrong, i.e. murder, like everybody will agree murder is wrong. Mm-hmm. Well, you're presupposing that the Christian God is actually the true God. And if there is no God, then you actually don't have an objective standard by which to make that claim. And he just lays it out, and it's a pretty epic debate. Just go watch it; it's awesome. Let's see. Yeah, basically anything presuppositional is awesome. I would also recommend, just because this is one of my favorite books, and it kind of revolutionized how I see things, is Desiring God by John Piper. Mm-hmm. And he really plays off of the first question of the Westminster Catechism of what is the chief end of man. The chief end of man is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. And so Christianity is not a bunch of rules. It's as I've said several times, it's by grace through faith in Christ, and your reward is God himself, who is the most worthwhile and most valuable thing in existence. And so what better thing could you get than more of God? So there you go. Hugh Ross, John Piper, Greg Bahnsen, Bahsen. So the Bahnsen-Stein debate on YouTube.
Fantastic. That's really good stuff. I'm going to have to look some of that up. And if you don't mind, I'd like to make a recommendation to people because I just recently picked it up again. One of the first books that really opened my eyes to what it is to accept God, accept Jesus, and learn about it and do it from the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I just picked it up again for the first time this week, is Save Me From Myself by Brian Head Welch.
Interesting.
It was a book that when it came out, I was having a really difficult time. Mm-hmm. But I loved Korn as a teenager. And when he quit, it was abrupt. I didn't understand it. Nobody understood it. And when I read that book, I got it. And it made sense to me. Mm-hmm. And when I got to meet him on the book tour that he did, he was an amazing presence to be in.
Yeah, there is no doubt that his story is absolutely insane. There's no way around it, right?
So if you like just even rock and roll biography, but with an ending that is not altogether common in the rock and roll world, I would highly recommend, if you have, maybe even if you are a skeptic, learn it from someone who was in probably one of the heaviest and biggest bands of the late 90s, early 2000s, and has seen a lot. Pretty much went cold turkey. He did go cold turkey.
Yeah, he did go cold turkey.
And
he was on basically everything you could think of too.
Yeah. Went from probably, shooting up in a hotel bathroom to getting baptized in the River Jordan. That's a pretty incredible story. And it was one of the first that I was actively interested in reading about. So there's my recommendation. You have our recommendations. Cody, this was really awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Sean, thanks for having me on. I'd be happy to come back anytime you want, and I will be absolutely sending you more pedals.
Awesome. I look forward to it. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this little conversation with Cody. Please do give him a follow over on the Facebooks, the Instagrams, the whatevers that you can find him in. Find out if your favorite guitar gear will PDubs or not. We might have to figure out whether or not some of your stuff gents or not, but that's another show. If this is your first time joining us for this, you picked a really great night to join in. Thank you so much for doing so. Please do click the subscribe button, ring the notification bell. There will be no pedal demo this Saturday, sadly, again, just life happens. But the Epiphone DC Pro demo is finally ready, and that will be up on this Saturday for you to enjoy. Until next time, my friends, for Cody, I'm Sean Pierce Johnson, wishing you all out there great tone, good health, and happy stomping, my friends. We'll see you same bat time, same bat day, and all that good stuff on the same bat channel. Cheers, my friends.